Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Mariancho, and this video is all about the quarterback, tight end, and defensive position for week one. My rankings for essentially every player at these three spots. I probably don't need to rank all options because most of you don't start more than 12. But let's begin. Let's go with quarterback, where obviously I'm sticking with Josh Allen versus Arizona at number one. The Cardinals had a horrible defense last year. I don't think it got any better, and especially against the run, they were atrocious. So Josh Allen will run all over them. He is a lock in your lineup based on where you drafted him. And same applies with Jalen Hurts. You can't really bench him. I think we're going to find out if Saquon actually impacts his rushing touchdowns. If anything, it might be the loss of Jason Kelce, but there's shootout potential in this matchup, and the Packers also had a bad run defense last year. I still expect over 600 rushing yards from Hurts this season. He's a top four quarterback at worst every single week. And number three, I'm going with Anthony Richardson versus Houston. And Coach Shane Steichen has said in interviews that he believes Richardson can lead all quarterbacks this season in rushing yards. So if that's going to happen, they're going to have to start off red hot week one. They're also going to need to light up the scoreboard and dominate time of possession. So I think 80 plus rushing yards and 3 or 4 total touchdowns is legitimately possible here for Richardson this week. And if you look back to last year when he completed the games, it only happened twice, but he did average over 24 fantasy points per game. I love him this year. I think he will be a top 5 quarterback this season. In week one, I got him at number 3. Number 4, I got Lamar Jackson at the Chiefs, followed by Mahomes in the same game at number 5. For Lamar, this is a must-win for the Ravens. He didn't run much last year in that playoff matchup, but I expect it to change in the season opener, especially with the defensive attention on Derrick Henry. And I think the Ravens do win the game. It's a potential shootout, and you definitely want a piece of both offenses. And I know that Mahomes doesn't have Hollywood Brown, but he can always light up the scoreboard. They at least have Juju Smith-Schuster to compensate, and every single week, Mahomes is a must start. You're not going to get cute with any of these top 5 options. And at number 6, I'm going with CJ Stroud at the Colts, and I think this is a very tight, high-scoring matchup. It goes back and forth, and Stroud will need to sling it in order to keep up. If I'm right about Taylor and Richardson in this game, then not only are they going to need to throw it a lot, but the time of possession will heavily favor the Colts, and that's really going to lead to good game script for this passing offense with Houston. So at worst, I think he's going to be a top 8 quarterback every week in my ranks, and this week I see a high score for Houston. I will take Stroud at number 6. Number 7, though, I got Tua Tagovailoa versus the Jacksonville, and the trend in his career is elite passing numbers in September and October, followed by a drop-off in November and December. And this is a week one. You don't have to worry about the weather. It's also at home, and the secondary for the Jags does not scare you. Fire him up with confidence. I genuinely think Tua could be the quarterback 1 on the week. So you trust him for sure. There is no risk at this moment in time. Number 8, I have Kyler Murray at Buffalo, and the Cardinals defense will lose a lot of games this year, but if everyone stays healthy, I think this offense will keep them very competitive. They could have plenty of garbage time as well to pad their stats in this matchup. On the road versus Buffalo, I like the upside for Kyler in this one. At number 9, I got Jayden Daniels at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Bucs had a bottom 4 secondary last season, so I think Terry McLaurin goes off. And my only knock on Daniels in my rankings preseason was that I was concerned he would get hurt as the season went along, but he's healthy in week 1. That's not a issue at the moment. And let's see how high the ceiling really is with this rookie. He could put up 1,000 rushing yards this season. So wouldn't be shocked at all if he put up top 5 fantasy numbers this week. I think you should start him. He's a top 10 play, in my opinion. Number 10, though, I got Jordan Love at Philly. And if this game wasn't in Brazil, I would probably say it's an automatic shootout. But it could also be a very strange game. However, all his wide receivers are healthy at the moment, and that unlocks his true ceiling. Jacobs is an underrated pass catcher as well, and I could see 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns for Jordan Love in this game. But let's see this offense in action before we commit to like a top 6 ranking. He still does not offer very much rushing value, and I could also see them like leaning on Jacobs to kill the clock and get out of this weird Brazil game as fast as possible. So that's why I only have him at number 10, but he was a top 5 quarterback in the second half last season. He could do it again this year. Number 11, though, I got Jared Goff versus the Rams, who I think is one of the safest quarterbacks you can play, especially when he's at home. Last year, in his home games, he averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game. It's another home game this week against his former team, and that revenge narrative is definitely going to lead to a lot of usage. So in one of the highest scoring games of the week, I think Jared Goff is a lock for top 12 numbers. I kind of want to rank him higher, but again, there is absolutely no rushing value to lean on. That is the concern. But I think he's a great start. Very, very safe play every single week when he plays at home. Number 12, though, I have Trevor Lawrence at the Dolphins, and the only thing that really held him back last season was when Etienne dominated the goal line touches and scored like 2 touchdowns in a given matchup, and also the fact that his wide receivers kept stepping an inch out of bounds in the end zone. This will be a very high-scoring game, and Lawrence will need to throw it deep to keep up. I see some garbage time here for the Jags, as well as the fact that he's an underrated runner of the football. I want to rank him higher, but even at quarterback 12, I think he's an excellent start in your lineup this week. I think it speaks to the depth at the position this week and the rest of the season. But number 13, I have Joe Burrow versus New England, and on the bright side, Jamar Chase is finally practicing, but this could be a very heavy run script for the Bengals, as we do expect them to dominate the Patriots in week 1. So he has a very high floor, even if Chase does play badly. If he's very rusty, I still think Burrow can light it up, but the ceiling will be higher in future weeks. I could see them benching the starters if the score is like 30-6 at the end of the third quarter. So that's my only concern, but QB 13, I think, is still a legitimate starter this week. There's a lot of depth at quarterback right now. But number 14, I got Caleb Williams versus the Titans, and this is not the average rookie debut. I'm either completely wrong about the Titans and their defense does show up, or Caleb is going to look exactly as advertised and could have like 25-point upside in this game. He also has underrated rushing value here, so I'll trust him as a high-end streamer in week 1, but I kind of want to see it with some confidence before I rank him in the top 10. But even if L'Jarius Sneed does slow down DJ Moore, I still think that Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen can light things up. I am not afraid to trust Caleb if I drafted him as my starter. And at number 15, I'm also pretty confident in Matthew Stafford this week on the road at Detroit. The Lions had an elite run defense last year, so I expect that to continue, which means Kyren Williams likely has a down game. And McVay is still going to find a way to dial up 30 points on the scoreboard here, so Stafford will be firing on all cylinders against his former team. They lost in the wild card round. They will put up a elite fight in this one. So while he does not have any rushing value, I do also think that 300 yards and 3 touchdowns is in the cards. We'll see about the turnovers, though. He could have a cap ceiling if he throws like 2 picks and gives you like -3 rushing yards on the game. At number 16, I got Baker Mayfield versus Washington at home, and apologies for the lighting change. I skipped him when I was originally recording this video, but I really love his upside here. I think he's an excellent streamer in week 1 because the Commanders had the worst passing defense in the NFL last year, and at home I think Tampa wants to remind everyone that they won a playoff game last season. Everyone's sleeping on them. Nobody's that hyped unless you're like an actual Buccaneers fan, and I'm sure they're tired of it. So Baker, I think, tears it up this week, lighting it up with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin down the field. Maybe Jalen McMillan also looks good. And given he's 100% healthy right now, I think his overconfidence might lead to some extra scrambles, and he could offer an extra like 30 rushing yards to boot. So I actually really like his floor. I think he's an excellent streamer, but in week 1, very few people are going to start him. I think in DFS, he's actually an excellent play with a cheap price and probably low ownership. So keep him in mind in daily. I think the Bucks win, and Baker's a very legit start, especially in 2 quarterback leagues, a top 16 play in week 1. Number 17, though, is where I'm starting to actually consider benching these guys. I have Brock Purdy versus the Jets at 17, and I genuinely think this is a very low-scoring defensive battle, but this might be one of the lowest ranks I give you all year on Brock Purdy. Ayuk, with very little practice time against Sauce Gardner, probably plays kind of poorly, and the other corners are also pretty elite for the Jets. So it's just a bad matchup here, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does throw for 250 plus yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. It's the Niners offense at the end of the day. So I still trust him from like a floor standpoint, but I do kind of worry about some interceptions and turnovers in this one. He probably goes off in week 2 to compensate at the Vikings, and you're probably going to see me rank him top 12, if not top 10, a lot more this year. But against the Jets, I'll pass in week 1. I think it's only viable in 2 QB leagues. And same applies with Dak Prescott at the Browns. It's a terrible matchup. The Browns gave up the 4th fewest points per game to fantasy quarterbacks last year, and CeeDee Lamb might have a rusty first half. So I think Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, and the rest of that defense give the Cowboys a lot of problems, and I'm going to bench Dak week 1 for those reasons. He'll bounce back very soon. I trust him long-term. I think he is a top 10 quarterback this season, but there's far higher scoring offenses to chase throughout the league this week, and that's why only in a 2-quarterback league would I actually put Dak in my lineup. Number 19, though, this might surprise you, but I got Sam Darnold at the Giants, and he's going to have some egregious interceptions this year. But before anyone has tape on him with the Vikings, I think he could light up the stat line with 350 yards this week and maybe even 3 touchdowns. I really do believe that, because Nick Mullins averaged 380 passing yards in 3 full games last season. Mullins is the backup right now, so why can't Darnold do it himself? We got Aaron Jones fully healthy. He could have 80 yards after the catch. Jefferson and Addison could both go over 100 yards as well. And I think Kevin O'Connell needs a confident Darnold in order for them to have any chance to compete this year. So they're going to tear it up this week. It's a must win at the Giants before their schedule gets tough as balls. And that's why give me Darnold as a top 20 quarterback in week 1. I think he has a very high ceiling. Even if he throws like 2 interceptions, I think he will go over 300 yards a lot this year. Number 20, though, I have Justin Herbert versus Las Vegas, and I literally have no idea what to expect with this team. He could look elite. He could also look like shit, and he probably settles somewhere in between. But he's coming off the foot injury, and today there was a weird report that, according to him, it was not a plantar fascia injury. It was something else that he doesn't want to disclose, and that actually makes me a little bit more confident in his rushing ability. But I still don't think his rushing stats carry you to a top 15 week, given he's fresh off the walking boot. And even if the Chargers win the game, I think it is a little too risky to like fully bet on the ceiling hitting in week 1 with a rookie wide receiver as the best option. So I think they lean a little more on the run. I'll pass on Herbert until we know exactly what we're getting in the Greg Roman offense. But there is a world where he does look like he's a top 12 play week in, week out. It is possible, but a little too risky at the moment. Number 21, I have Kirk Cousins versus the Steelers, and how much are the Falcons actually going to ask of Cousins in week 1 coming off the ACL? I don't see like a massive commitment to him early in the season. I see more of a low-scoring game here as well, and I expect Atlanta to lean on Bijan as much as possible, so he's going to hand it off far more than throw it, in my view. He could look excellent as he tries to shut people up on the Penix hype. However, I do think that the first month or so for Atlanta's offense could be kind of bumpy when it comes to the young weapons actually clicking. So we're going to find out. I'm very interested to watch, but I'm not going to start Cousins just yet. I think he's a little bit too risky at the moment. At number 22, I think it's only an option in 2 quarterback leagues, but Deshaun Watson comes here at number 22 versus Dallas. When he was healthy last year, he was actually just as good for fantasy as Trevor Lawrence. He was kind of in the top 16, 17 on a per game basis, but he is healthy right now, so you could talk yourself into it. He does have some upside, especially if he wants to prove he's still got it at an elite level, but I don't trust him in that regard. But now's his chance to prove the doubters wrong. I don't love the matchup versus the Cowboys, however. Even without Deron Bland, I don't think Watson looks elite, and this feels like a low-scoring game. I will pass on Deshaun. I'm also going to pass on Geno Smith here at number 23 versus Denver. If I'm wrong about this team, then it's because Geno answers all of my questions and looks fantastic with Ryan Grubb's system. But until these rookie coaches prove my concerns wrong, I am not going to be ranking Geno in the top 20 behind this terrible offensive line. So I'm very interested to see what this offense actually looks like, but I could be way off on this call. I will play it safe and not start him until we know for sure what we're getting. At number 24, though, I have Aaron Rodgers at the Niners. And there's a world where Rodgers pads his stats all year long with a shit ton of easy checkdowns to Breece Hall, especially in the red zone, just to get like those extra touchdowns, because you know he wants to prove that he's still at the MVP caliber of his game. But what a tough matchup to draw right at the gate against San Francisco. There's also a world where he looks completely washed off the Achilles, and you know he doesn't offer much rushing value to begin with. So he's far too risky to trust when we haven't seen him complete a pass in almost 2 years. I will keep Rodgers on the waiver wire, if not the bench. Number 25, I got Bo Nix at Seattle, and I think Bo Nix could actually look like the most game-ready quarterback of all week 1, but he was named captain as of today. Sean Payton also loves him. He's had 61 college starts under his belt, and this organization wants to bury the memory of the Russell Wilson bust. So he ran for 510 rushing yards in college 2 years ago. He's a very sneaky, valuable fantasy quarterback this year. I think the floor is actually very high with Nix this year, and it wouldn't shock me if we look back in December and see that he had top 20 value on a weekly basis because he has a very low interception total. Last year in college, he only threw 3 interceptions on 470 pass attempts. So I got Seattle on upset alert this week, and I think Bo Nix is a very intriguing play, but to pretend like he's a safe call in week 1 would be naive. At 25, though, I think he's better than he gets credit for. Number 26, I got Daniel Jones versus the Vikings, and the Vikings don't scare you that much, and at least for now, his job security is as high as it will be all year long. Maybe he shocks me and puts up like 75 rushing yards. It is possible that I'm like 12 spots too low on Daniel Jones here at 26, but it's just such an ugly start to actually put in your lineup. No one's excited to do it, and this is inevitably going to crash and burn. He could literally throw for like less than 100 yards and 4 interceptions this week, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. So no thank you with Daniel Jones. He's the last guy I'm legitimately considering in a deep 2 QB league. But at 27, this is where we definitely bench these players. I got Bryce Young at the New Orleans Saints, and this might be an extremely low-scoring game, but I think the new offense offers an element of surprise that could bode well for Young. Not expecting the world from him, but I do think Carolina wins, so you could do worse than Bryce. Number 28, I got Will Levis at Chicago, and if Hopkins plays, I'll bump him up in the ranks a little bit, but the Bears defense was fantastic to close out last season, and I do not trust Will Levis. There's upside, but until I know what we're getting in Tennessee, no thank you. At 29, I have Gardner Minshew at the Chargers, and he's going to get sacked like crazy in my opinion here, but Adams owns this matchup over the last 2 years, so he is going to pad his stats getting Devontae the ball and trying to convince him not to demand a trade. But it will not be enough to trust, however, so no thank you. Number 30, I got Russell Wilson at the Falcons, and fuck no, I'm not starting Russ. He needs to compete, though, to keep Justin Fields on the bench, but this offense scares the shit out of me, and I'll leave Wilson on the waiver wire and maybe pick up Fields in a couple of weeks once the rumors that he starts gets louder. Number 31, I got Derek Carr versus the Panthers, and he might throw a few more passing yards than Russell Wilson, but Russ at least offers some rushing value. Carr does not, and Taysom Hill might run some wildcat in the red zone and completely neuter any upside that Carr might offer. So fuck no as well. And then lastly, I have Jacoby Brissett at the Bengals, and this is just asking to lose if you put Brissett in your lineup. He's actually been somewhat serviceable when he got the start in Cleveland 2 years ago, but who are we kidding? You're not starting Brissett. There are no weapons to be confident in the Pats offense. Let's move over to tight end now, where at number 1, I got Sam LaPorta versus the Rams, and this is a massive shootout on Sunday night, and the Rams were a top 5 matchup for tight ends last year. I think LaPorta finds the end zone with confidence. Number 2, I got Trey McBride at Buffalo, where we could have a slow start for Marvin Harrison, but no matter what, we're getting some easy garbage time points as the Cardinals inevitably trail in Buffalo, and I do feel like 10 targets feels like a lock for McBride in this matchup. Number 3, I have Dalton Kincaid versus the Cardinals in the same game, and Curtis Samuel has turf toe, Keon Coleman making his rookie debut, and Shakir not being a threat at all means this game is all about Josh Allen, James Cook, and especially Dalton Kincaid in the passing game. So say hello to the new number 1 weapon for the Buffalo Bills. He will be a potential league winner this season. Number 4, I have Travis Kelce versus Baltimore, and this is the year where you're not going to see me rank him number 1 automatically every week. I understand that trusting the other receivers, at least right now, is a little shaky, but that means they will feed him plenty. I think it's a long season though, and they need him fresh for the playoffs. You know they're going to ease him in over the course of the season. He will have some blow-ups, but I don't know if they need to force the issue with Kelce in week 1. And while no one is benching him, I will prefer the young studs and rank them higher in week 1. At number 4, Kelce's still a lock in your lineup. Number 5, though, I have George Kittle versus the Jets, and there's some elite corners on the Jets defense, but Kittle can dominate linebackers all game long. He feels like a smash in this game. Number 6, I got Mark Andrews at Kansas City, who's technically questionable for this game, but will play. Everyone says that the car accident is nothing to be worried about, but I can't help but think about it in the back of my mind. Just like Kelce here, it's a long season, and why not use him as more of a decoy when you also have Isaiah Likely and his deep threat ability looming on the roster as well. So I see quite a few 2 tight end sets this game and all season long, honestly. So that's why I think I did bump him down a little bit in the ranks. You're still going to start him. I still trust him in my lineup, but I think there's a little bit more risk than normal at this point in time. He'll be fine all year. I'm not worried about Andrews, but this week he's not in my top 5. Number 7, though, I got Jake Ferguson at Cleveland, and Ferguson had the most red zone targets of any tight end last year. They're going to feed him all game long, especially after he was the number 1 weapon for all of training camp for Prescott. So expect even more usage if Lamb does play poorly, if he is rusty in the first half. Ferguson to the moon, baby. I love Jake Ferguson this year. But number 8, I got Evan Engram at Miami, and Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas could be a problem for him this year, but he did lead all tight ends in targets last season, and he might not find the end zone that often, but he's still a PPR stud and a very safe bet every single week. Lawrence should feed him all year long. So I have no concerns with Engram. He's a very safe bet to be a top 10 play week in, week out. Number 9, though, I got Kyle Pitts versus Pittsburgh, and he did tweak his hamstring, but he says he's fine. He says he's definitely going to play, and I'm not worried about that. But I can't say I fully trust him just yet. In this new offense, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, and while the volume should be there this season, can he finally score touchdowns at a decent rate? He's never scored more than 3 in a full season. So the moment of truth is finally here. If you're a Kyle Pitts truther, you might look really smart. You also might look very foolish, and we might all be laughing at you once again. But I will say this, I kind of got boxed out of tight end in my 10-team PPR league, and Pitts is my starting option. I'm rooting for him now. Let's hope he pays off this year. Number 10, I got David Njoku versus Dallas, and this is a bit of a gamble. He has top 3 upside any given week, but he never really got going with Deshaun Watson last season. I'm really hoping that he unhitched the trailer because his ceiling is very fun to watch. Fingers crossed that Watson learned from Flacco and unlocks Njoku's true potential. I really hope that's what we get this year. Number 11, I got Brock Bowers at the Chargers, who's technically questionable, but does feel like a guarantee to play. He has been banged up for the last couple weeks, but should be good to go. They used him all over the place in the preseason, so I'm optimistic that that continues, but historically, a rookie tight end making his debut is not a safe play, but if anyone can buck that trend, you'd think it would be Bowers. He's really talented, and the hype I do think is real. So outside the top 10, but don't be shocked if I start ranking him like number 7 if he really does live up to expectation. Number 12, though, I got Dallas Goedert versus the Packers in Brazil. Kind of scares me. I don't think Jahan Dotson affects him, but I don't know that for sure. However, Goddard feels like the last tight end whose floor is one that you can somewhat trust. If Kellen Moore uses him like Dalton Schultz, then we're going to see like at least 6 touchdowns this year, and I would love for that to happen. We might have a steal on our hands if it does click, but Brian Johnson made him look like shit last September, and this could go south once again. It is a true coin flip with Goddard right now. But moving forward, boy, oh boy, are you just hoping for the best? And I'm going to make a personal shout out to Arthur Smith. Please, Arthur Smith, leave the blocking to Darnell Washington and just let Freiermuth cook linebackers on seam routes all game long. Please. I am begging you. My 16% Freiermuth shares on Underdog are in the balance. So please, everyone, if you're watching, pray for me. And I really need all the good vibes I can get. I am hoping this bet pays off. But number 14, I got Taysom Hill versus Carolina. And Juwan Johnson looks like he'll play, but coming off foot surgery, I think it might be a slow start. And I still think it's bullshit that you can actually start Taysom Hill at tight end. But if he's eligible, why the fuck not? Last time he played Carolina in week 2 last year, he ran for 75 yards on 9 carries. That's over 8 yards per carry. And he's a cheat code, so exploit the system if you can. He's one of the best streamers at the position on a weekly basis because he does have 20-point upside, especially if he gets some snaps at quarterback. But number 15, I got Tyler Conklin at San Francisco. And with a lack of chemistry for Mike Williams and Aaron Rodgers at the moment, I think Conklin has a chance to really step up and establish himself as the third target in this offense. I drafted him more than any other tight end this summer, so I'm really hoping for a Robert Tonyan breakout. This could be the year for Conklin. Number 16, I got Hunter Henry at the Bengals, and Henry did practice fully on Wednesday, so the foot injury is not a concern. He will play in week 1, but although the ceiling might be capped, he might also be the safest Patriot of them all to start in fantasy, and that includes Ramondre, but it's still not saying very much. Number 17, I got Dalton Schultz at the Colts, and I love his talent. I've been a fan of Schultz for a long time, but I'm just worried about the target share behind Nico, Tank, and Diggs, you know? He's very touchdown dependent, but so is everyone at this point. For tight end, you could do a lot worse than Schultz. Number 18, I got Cole Kmet versus the Titans, and I'm really hoping that Gerald Everett stays on the sideline for most of the game, but it's not guaranteed. And even if he does, why not just throw the ball to DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze? There's a lot more excitement to do that. So that's why Kmet just feels so risky. I don't think he's like a great play this year. Very touchdown dependent, like all these tight ends at this point. But number 19, I got Luke Musgrave at Philly, and Tucker Kraft was on the injury report today, so Musgrave might get some extra value to start the season, but it's kind of the same situation as Schultz and Kmet. There's just too many other weapons to actually feel confident in starting Musgrave any single week. So just praying for a touchdown at this point. Good luck for it to hit. Number 20, I think I'm going to bench Noah Fant this week. It's either going to be the best season of Fant's career, or no one will ever be excited about drafting him ever again. And I'm worried it's the latter. I want to see him actually play well before I endorse him in the lineup. And 21, same applies with Colby Parkinson. I really want to see it before I trust it, but there's no Tyler Higbee, so he's got a shot. But even Stafford has not used the tight end very much in this offense, and it still feels very risky. I will pass on Parkinson. But at 22, I got Isaiah Likely at Kansas City, and Likely is my sleeper pick this week to shock us all and put up top 10 numbers. If Andrews is a legit decoy, he could have a massive game, but even if that's not the case, Likely earned more snaps after how well he played last season, and I do think there is a world where he does find his way into the end zone as they focus on every other weapon while in the red zone this week. So I think he could be a trendy pickup off of waivers for week 2. I could see a big role for him all year long. I think Likely is actually very interesting to stash on your bench. But number 23, I got Zack Ertz at the Bucks, and I really want Ben Sinnott to be the guy. But until Ertz goes down, it's going to be annoying as fuck in terms of this target split between both tight ends. And Sennett is a rookie, but beyond Terry McLaurin, who the fuck else is catching passes in this offense. So I think Ertz is a sneaky play in full PPR, but will the touchdown hit? I doubt it. Number 24, I got Cade Otton versus Washington, and the Commanders' defense sucks, but you're just praying for a touchdown at this point. And then last guy I'll kind of go in depth on is Mike Gesicki versus the Patriots. It's a revenge game for him where the Pats never really used him in that offense. So they could get him involved, but I'd be a lot more interested if you told me that Chase actually sits out. That's why I'm going to say no thank you with Gesicki. And then I'll just list off 26 through 35. I think all 10 of these guys are in the wait and see category. They could have value, but until we get some consistent production, I don't have any interest in rostering them. I got Okonkwo at 26, followed by Jonnu Smith, Dawson Knox, Hayden Hurst, Ben Sennett, Greg Dulcich, Theo Johnson, Jatavian Sanders, Josh Oliver, and lastly, Alec Ogletree at 35. We will see if there's any value for any of these guys this year. Lastly, though, let's pivot to defense and wrap up this video. Before I get into it, I just want to mention this is a very weird week. The schedule put a lot of good defenses against really good offenses, and my rankings are probably going to shock you because it's a very unpredictable situation in week one. We don't know if every defense is going to be as good as last year or if there's someone that shocks us or someone that really falls off a cliff. So while there are some like obviously talented teams, I am trending for floor plays in week one because it is just so unpredictable at the most random position in fantasy. So don't go too deep. I expect some criticism here, but these are my defensive rankings for week one. At number one, I am trusting the Bengals versus the Patriots. It's clearly the highest floor on the week versus Brissett and the Pats. You can't go wrong. Number two, I got the Bears defense versus the Titans, and I'm going to trust that their defensive production from last year stays as good as it was, especially with Eberflus on the hot seat. If they miss the playoffs, you know he's fired, so he's extremely motivated to get that defense humming early on. Number three, I'm going to take the Vikings at the Giants, and I know it's risky, but I think Daniel Jones is a turnover machine, and I don't see them scoring more than like 20 points no matter what. I think the Vikings are a very safe play with legit pick six upside. Number four, I got the Chargers versus the Raiders, and I get it if you think I'm a homer, but Khalil Mack had 6 sacks versus Las Vegas at home in week 4 last year. Then the team quit on Brandon Staley and gave up 63 points in week 15. So I think Minshew maxes out at 21 points this week. I think the floor is high for the Chargers, especially with plenty of sack and turnover potential. I think there's a world where they're a top 5 defense. I got them ranked here at number 4. I think they're a very safe play, but I get it if you think I'm a homer. However, I think they're a decent option to roster because next week they get the Panthers followed by Pittsburgh on the road in week 3. So I think they have some legitimate fantasy value to start the year. They're not a terrible play this week, but number 5, I'll probably get some hate for this, but I got the Panthers at the Saints. I see a very low-scoring game. Like, I could literally envision like a 10-9 score between both of these teams. I have the Panthers winning. I think their defense steps up. Give me them as a top 5 play this week. At number 6, I'll trust the floor of the Falcons with Raheem Morris locking up that defensive game plan, especially with Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons added to the mix. I think they can shut down the Russell Wilson Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Betting against it feels like a very wise decision, and the Falcons usually always step up at home. I do not see Pittsburgh scoring more than 20 points. So high floor for these top 6 with some legitimate turnover upside. I am just trying to play it safe with my defensive ranks. But at number 7, here is where we lean into the talent. I got the Browns versus Dallas. They're an elite defense, and if Lamb is even just a little bit rusty to start this game, then they could put up a top 3 score on the week. I will trust the Browns as a weekly play all year long. But Dallas was the highest scoring offense last year. There is some risk here. That's why I do not have them top 5. At 8 and 9, though, back-to-back in the same matchup, I got the 49ers and the Jets. I prefer the Niners because I think they win. And I'm still definitely going to start both of these defenses. If you did draft them, I would keep them in the lineup, especially here. I think it will be a very low score game on Monday Night Football, but there is the risk for a shootout. One of them, if not both, could burn you, but there's too much talent on both sides of the ball in order to bench either. You know you're going to trust them week to week. That's why you drafted them. You don't want to roster a second defense. So just keep them in your lineup. I don't think they're worth benching or cutting just to pick up like the Chargers or Panthers. That kind of feels foolish, even if the other ones might be safer that I ranked above them. But at 10 and 11, I got the Ravens at the Chiefs, followed by the Chiefs versus Baltimore back to back. And I did have the Ravens higher because I do pick them to win the game. And both defenses here are also elite, but playing against each other is why I don't have them in the top 10. It's the matchup why I'm worried about it. But if the final score was 40-35, you wouldn't be surprised at all. And that would completely wreck the fantasy value. That's why I have them on the lower end of the top 12. But if you also told me the score was like 25-21, I would probably think they're very good plays as well. They could both score like defensive touchdowns and definitely pay off. I get it if you think I'm too low, but I have them both in the top 12. I still think they're decent floor plays this week. And then at number 12, another defense you probably drafted high, I got the Cowboys at Cleveland. And there's no Deron Bland, but Deshaun is no longer elite. I still trust that it's a low-score game with turnover potential. Maybe Trayvon Diggs catches a pick six, but maybe he gives up a couple house calls as well. So a little bit risky, but inside the top 12, I do think they're legit. Number 13, though, I got the Saints versus the Panthers. And even if the Panthers do play well, this is going to be a low-scoring game no matter what. Most of y'all probably think I'm too low, but I think Carolina does win the game. Number 14, I got the Raiders at the Chargers, and I do think the Chargers win, but it's probably a low-score game on both sides as well. And the Raiders defense is talented. They're well coached, especially on the defensive line. They could give a lot of problems to their opponents, and this is a sneaky good play. I cannot rank them outside the top 15. I do think they're a legit streamer this week. Number 15, I got the Steelers at the Falcons, and I'm going to trust the coaching, but this Falcons offense could dominate if Bijan takes over. There's a little bit of risk in this one. Number 16 and 17, though, I got the Broncos back-to-back with the Seahawks, and this is going to be a very tight game in my eyes. Going to come down to a field goal, probably like a 23-21 final score, but I do think Denver wins. I get it if you prefer the Seahawks and think I'm wrong. And I think the Broncos win the turnover battle, so that's my tiebreaker. I also worry about the Seahawks offensive line giving up way too much pressure and a lot of sacks, but Seattle does get New England next week, so I think you could stash them if you have the space and feel good about them on your roster, especially next week. They'll be a top 5 play. But number 18, I got the Bills versus Arizona, and I really wish Matt Milano was going to play, but at home they should force some turnovers and limit Kyler a little bit. But I'm really worried about the garbage time, honestly. There's a world where Kyler puts up like 30 points on offense and still loses by 10 because the Bills score 40. Number 19, I got the Bucks versus Washington, and the Tampa Bay Bucks still have some savvy veterans on defense, but a rookie quarterback on the opposite side inevitably will make some mistakes, but we might be underestimating the Commanders' ability to move the ball. It's not as good of a matchup as it was last year. And number 20, I got the Giants versus the Vikings, and the team is not 0-6 yet, so the defense will put up a fight as they're not convinced that they cannot compete, especially with Brian Burns. There is some upside with the Giants defense, but Darnold is the reason why I'm interested. You know he's going to throw at least one egregiously bad interception, so you're really hoping for a pick six. It's not impossible, but who the fuck is stopping Justin Jefferson? They could give up over 400 yards against Minnesota. Number 21, though, I am trying to bench these guys. I got the Titans at Chicago, and I genuinely have no idea what this team looks like. I think they are dog shit, but they could come out swinging and completely shock me. I will acknowledge that is a possibility. It's a true wild card here with the Snead edition versus a rookie quarterback, but I'd rather just stay away. And I'm also going to bench the Commanders at Tampa. The Commanders defense is still very bad in terms of talent, but Dan Quinn has some tricks up his sleeve. They should lose, but Baker can always make some mistakes. Not enough to keep them viable. 23 and 24, I got the Eagles and Packers, and the neutral field in Brazil makes this kind of unpredictable. I like the offenses, but it could also be a very low-scoring game. I will pass on both. Then I got the Patriots at Cincinnati, and at some point the Bengals will ease up and show some mercy. But once they have 30 points on the scoreboard, you know they're going to stop embarrassing New England, and they might bench their starters and just play prevent defense. The Patriots defense could maybe put up a decent fight and limit them to like 22, but not excited, that's for sure. 26, I got the Dolphins versus Jacksonville, and there could be some cheap turnovers as the Jags get more desperate and start chucking it deep to catch up late in the game, but going to be a very high-scoring game. I do not want to bet on either defense here. And then the Colts versus Texans, I envision a shootout. I'll pass on both. The Lions and then the Rams at 29-30, I'm going to pass on another shootout. No, thank you. And then at 31, I got the Cardinals against Josh Allen. Their defense is still probably one of the worst in the league. And lastly, I have the Jaguars at Miami. The Dolphins could easily hang 40, maybe even 50 points this week, and I'm going to stay away at all costs. So that's it for this video. All of my top 20 rankings at all three positions. Fuck it, I'll show you the top 25 on the screen here, but I'm really only trying to start the top 12 given how deep the position is in terms of, like, you know, most leagues are 12 teams at the most, so that's what I'm counting on. And at least at tight end, it's kind of obvious. Quarterback super deep, but defense is fucking weird this week. There's some odd matchups and a lot of things that are unpredictable. So I wish you good luck. As always, if you have any questions in the comment section, feel free to ask me below. I will answer them before kickoff. And tomorrow, or I guess today, I'll post this on Thursday, I'm also going to give you my weekly start-sit video for Thursday Night Football. Ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss out. But if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe as well. I'll see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.